very busy week for a lot of folks. A lot of things going on, and we're not going to tarry long here tonight. I want you to look with me. We're going to pick up where we left off this morning. We're going to race through this first part of it, and then we're going to slow down, hit three things, and then we're going to be good to go here as we move forward here tonight. So I want you to look up here with me. I want you to notice some things very, very quickly as we move forward. We're talking about, even though we kind of dovetailed these two things together, this morning we were talking about it from that Sunday morning series of rules of engagement. Tonight we're going back to our idea how to be happy, but we're looking at the roadmap that Jesus gave on where true happiness comes from, and it's found in the Sermon on the Mount in the Beatitudes section. But before we get back to that, very quickly, here's what we said, and I want you to I know I'm repeating some of this, but I'm repeating it because I'm so convinced it's so important. Happiness is more about a who than a what. If you're going to be happy, you're going to have to realize happiness doesn't come from possessions. It comes from having the right people in your life, loving them, being a part of their life, and being emotionally connected to them. If happiness was about a what, we'd all just go get whatever our what is, and then we'd all be happy forever and ever. We all know that's not true, because whenever we get our what, we start looking for a what else, or what's next, or what's better. Because when we get our dream what, whether it's a house, or a dress, or something electronic, or a boat, or whatever, it's not long before there's something better, bigger, shinier, faster, and our what doesn't look as good as it once looked, and we're not happy any longer. So it just doesn't work. Now here's the three things we said about happy people. Happy people are at peace with themselves. They're comfortable in their own skin. They're not waging this internal war trying to compare themselves to everybody else, and I wish I had that part of their life, and I wish I had this part of it. They're just happy with who they are. They're at peace with others. They're not in 15 different battles with other people and got all this drama and strife going on, and I'm so mad at this one, and I'm so mad at that one, and I hadn't forgot what that one over there did, and they're like Santa. They're making a list, but they just got the naughty list. All the people that they think have been mean to them, and they've got this long list. We've said so many times, if you're keeping score of other people's faults and failures, you're not doing it right. And aren't you glad God doesn't keep score? A lot of us do, glad God doesn't. Thirdly, happy people are at peace with God. So they're at peace with themselves, they're at peace with others, and they're at peace with God. And I talked about the fact that this all comes out of that question when the lawyer comes up and says, what's the greatest commandment? Out of all the 600 commandments, what's the most important one? And Jesus said, number one is, most important of all, love God with all your heart, body, soul, mind. That addresses the issue being at peace with God. You cannot be at odds with God. You cannot be angry with God and at the same time love Him with all your heart, soul, body, and mind. So it's about being at peace with God. He said, that's number one. Then Jesus said, I'll go a step further. I'll give you a second one, and that is love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. And here's the other two things of what we talked about. Be at peace with God. Love Him with heart, body, soul, mind. Love others. Be at peace with them. That's the neighbors. And then love everybody else as much as you love yourself. So it's those three things, being at peace with who I am, being at peace with other people around me, and not involved in a lot of strife and anger and bitterness and not willing to forgive, and then being at peace with God. And Jesus said on those two things, those two statements, hang everything. The secret of life is there. And then I talked about when we come to the end of our life, we're not going to have possessional regrets. We're not going to say, oh, I wish I'd owned one of those, or I wish I'd had one of those, or I wish I could spend more time, with all my toys. We're going to talk about, I want to make sure that I'm right with the who's in my life, not the what's in my life. Now, that took us right to the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus shows up at this mountain one day overlooking the Sea of Galilee. This huge crowd comes and he begins to speak. And the first thing he talked about, he's going to talk about, as we're seeing in Sunday school, he covers a multitude of subjects. But the first thing he talks about is happiness. Because everywhere you see the word blessed, it means happy. He's saying, happy are you if you're doing this, or if this characteristic is true in your life. Now, these are the ones we looked at this morning. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Now, this morning we talked about, we don't usually associate being happy with the word poor, but it's not talking about being poor in spirit doesn't mean I don't have anything, that I'm broke, there are people that are poor in spirit that have a lot. There are people that are poor in spirit that have a little. That has nothing to do with how much you have. It has to do with your relationship with your things versus your relationship with God. People that are poor in spirit are like Job. They understand. Everything I own is a gift from God. If God sees fit to bless me, I'm going to love God. If God sees fit to take it all away, I'm still going to love God. He gave it to me. He can take it away. I'm not wrapped up in my things. I'm wrapped up in being at peace with God. That's what it means to be poor in spirit. And you'll never be happy if you're wrapped up in your stuff. Secondly, he says, blessed are they that mourn. Again, we don't usually associate the word happy with mourning. But this one is so important, and I stayed with it this morning for a few moments, and I just want to remind you. People say, well, how can you be happy if you're mourning? Because if you mourn for others, that shows that you're not living a self-centered life. Life is not just about you, but you're connected to other people. You care about what goes on in their life. You have opened yourself up to them, knowing that's a risky thing to do. Listen, have you ever opened yourself up to somebody and got burned? Sure. But you know what? That's not a reason to stop doing it, because you can't live in fear. If you're going to mourn, sometimes that means you become vulnerable, you connect with other people, sometimes you get burned, sometimes you don't. But Jesus said, this is the way to go through life. Go through life connecting with people. By the way, in every one of these, Jesus is the example. Did Jesus open himself up relationally to people and get burned? Does the name Judas Iscariot mean anything? One of his 12 closest friends, the Lord opened his heart. In fact, in the garden when Jesus was arrested, how did he address Judas? Friend. He says, friend, what are you doing here? Sometimes you open up, you get burned. But you know what? At least you're living a connected life. If you go through life with this wall around you, keeping everybody at arm's length, not letting anybody get close to you and not getting close to anybody else, and you say, well, that's the way I'm going to be because I'm scared I'm going to get hurt, you cannot enjoy life living in fear. So Jesus said, you want to be happy? Get connected to other people, even though it hurts sometimes. Okay, next thing he said, blessed are the meek. We talked about the fact a lot of people in our culture consider meekness weakness. Not the case at all. Meekness in this sense, Jesus is saying you're happy if you see yourself the way you really are through the eyes of God. That you're a part of God's plan, but you're not the center of God's plan. That the world doesn't revolve around you. You know what? There's a lot of people that need to learn that. That the world doesn't revolve around them. That we are part of a program, we're part of a movement led by God, developed by Jesus Christ. We're a part of it. We're not the center of it. That's meekness, having a real sense of who you are. If you go through life thinking that you're bigger than what you really are, that you're more important than what you really are, you're just setting yourself up for danger. And then he says, blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness. That's that idea that you have this desire to treat people right, to do the right thing towards others. And then the last one we talked about, and this one's so important, blessed are the merciful. He said the only way you'll ever be happy in this life is if you're freely giving mercy, grace, and forgiveness to others. Because if you're not giving mercy, grace, and forgiveness, that means you're harboring ill will towards others. And if you're angry at a bunch of people, you can't be happy. If you're in Walmart and you see somebody, oh, I can't stand, how are you going to be happy? If you're at a ball game and you see 3 rows down in the bleachers somebody that you think, well, they did, oh, I can't believe they're ruined my whole night. How are you going to be happy? And then, of course, what about if you're in church and 5 pews over you see somebody and you feel you cannot enjoy life? Jesus said, you know what? Learn to let go of stuff. Learn to forgive, learn to give out mercy, learn to let it go, learn to walk away, learn to not harbor bitterness and anger towards others in your heart. It's not easy. By the way, I understand. Are any of these things easy to do? No. How many times have I said, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it? It's like losing weight. If it's easy, everybody'd be thin and athletic. Well, you can look up here and tell everybody's not thin and athletic, okay? We all know how. It's the hard part is the doing it. Same thing with biblical principles. We know what we ought to do, but nobody said it's easy. What Jesus said was, I know it's not easy, but I want you to give it your best shot. I want you to get up every day, trying every day to become the person that I want you to be. Now, let's come to the last three. Last three, we're going to take about 10, 12 minutes, and we're going to be out of here. Listen to what he says. Blessed are the pure in heart. Now, what does that mean? He says, happy are you if you have a pure heart. Now, here's how I want you to think about this. There's a lot of ways you can come at it. Here's how I want you to think about it. People with a pure heart are people who act without a selfish desire or without a motive. See, there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who are constantly trying to manipulate other people into doing what they want them to do. And there's people who are constantly trying to motivate people into doing what they ought to do. All the difference in the world in those two things. If you're trying to manipulate somebody to do something that'll benefit you, that is not pure of heart. You've got this hidden ulterior motive. You're trying to maneuver somebody into doing something that you know in the long run, that'll benefit me. I don't really care about them and their happiness and what it does for them. I want to get them to do this so in the long run, it'll help me out. Jesus said, don't be that person. He said, I want you to have a pure heart, pure motives towards other people. One of the things that, there's a lot of speeches that I've given my boys in the last 20 plus years. We've had so many of these kind of conversations. But one of the things I've told both of them over and over and over and over and over and over again, when we'd be having a serious conversation, I said, listen, I want you to remember something. I said, I know what I'm telling you is different from what you're hearing from a lot of other people in your life. They say, well, you ought to do this, you ought to do that. I said, here's the one thing I want you to remember. I am the one person in your life that has no ulterior motive. I'm not trying to get you to do something that benefits me. The only motive I have is I want you to be a happy, successful person. I'm not trying to get anything out of you. I said, you need to understand, there's a lot of these other people out there, they're trying to whisper in your ear and get you to do this and go there and do part of this because they want something out of it. There are a lot of people out there that are about manipulation, not motivation. Jesus shows up and he says, listen, you'll be a happy person if you learn to act towards people where you're not trying to get something out of it. You're just trying to be a good person. You're trying to be a good friend. You're trying to be a helpful person. And by the way, once again, this is a picture of Christ towards us. You know the only thing Jesus wants from you is for you to spend eternity in heaven with him. That's his only motive. His only motive is a pure motive. I want you to live forever and ever in the most wonderful place that you can imagine. If you've been with us on Wednesday nights, you know this about Satan. In the story of Job already we've seen, and the Bible describes him as a roaring lion seeking whom he what? May destroy. All the difference in the world. Jesus says, I want you to be pure in heart towards how you treat other people. Then the next one, blessed are the peacemakers. As far as we're going to go, blessed, happy are the peacemakers. Now, you got to think this through. You say, well, what's a peacemaker? Well, here, let's define a peacemaker this way. What's the opposite of a peacemaker? Troublemaker, right? You know any troublemakers? I'm not asking you to point anybody out, but do you know any troublemakers? Don't shout any names out, but do you know some on your job, in your neighborhood, in your family, in your circle of friends? Do you know anybody that's just they're just always stirring up strife. They're the pot stirrer. Everywhere they go, they're the pot stirrer. And they're always trying to stir up trouble. Well, the opposite of that is a peacemaker. A peacemaker is somebody that is not trying to hurt other people, not trying to gin up things that will hurt someone else. They're not the one gossiping. They're not the one criticizing. They're not the one saying, let me tell you what I heard. Those are troublemakers. Jesus said, I want you to be a peacemaker. Now, why are there so many more? Have you noticed this? Have you noticed there's more troublemakers than peacemakers in the world? Why is that? Because there's a lot of hurting people out there. You know what hurting people do? They hurt other people. That's what they do. When somebody's hurting themselves, they lash out at others. They're like a wounded animal. When an animal, the last thing you want to do is be in a small area with a bear that's wounded, right? Because what are they going to do? They're going to lash out. because they're scared, they're hurt, they're whatever. People are the same way. When people are hurting, when people are going through their own thing, one of the ways we unfortunately respond is we try and hurt others. We want everybody, there's people out there, you know what they want? They want everybody else to be as miserable as they are. Troublemakers. Jesus said, don't be that person. Be a peacemaker. He said, be the person that sees the best in others. Be the person. In my Sunday school class this morning, we were talking about what Jesus said about being honest. Let your yes be yes, your no be no. And we took our class over to my favorite verse that I've talked about so many times, Ephesians 4:29, when Paul says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but use words that are edifying. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, don't be the person that tears other people down. Be the person that builds other people up. When people walk away from you, after somebody's been around you and listened to you and you've kind of been yourself with them, do they walk away feeling down, feeling discouraged, feeling like, why do I even, or do they walk away encouraged and lifted up? I've said this many, many times, but one of the, and there's been several people in my life like this, but one of the ones Rosemary and I have talked about her so many times is Carolyn's mom. Carolyn's mom had a lot of health issues and just could easily have been one of those people that just kind of sit around and just, but Miss Strange wasn't that way. I've said this to people so many times. There would be times I would go over to her house to see her, and in the back of my mind, you know what I was thinking? I'm going to go try and cheer Miss Strange up. But you know what? When I left, you know what the truth was? She had cheered me up. That's what I'm talking about. So many times I'd go and listen. I remember, my boys still remember this. Both of my boys still remember this. They would go with me back when they were little. When I'd go make visits, they'd go with me. We'd go to Miss Strange's house. They thought she was the coolest lady ever. You know why? Because she could take a cigarette and inhale and blow smoke out her neck. They thought that was the most awesome thing they had ever seen in their life. We would walk away from her house and we would be encouraged. Now compare that to some people that these are the people when you see them in Walmart, you duck. Because you're like, I don't want to listen to them talk about how everybody and everything in the world is wrong and bad and miserable for the next 30 minutes. Be a peacemaker. That's what Jesus encouraged us to do. All right, last one. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Again, you notice how, and we're going to talk about this in a second, you notice how these are not words we commonly associate with being happy? Blessed or happy are the persecuted. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, does it? But here's something Jesus knew. Here's the deal about persecution. Here's the thing about people getting on you. And if you've lived long enough, you understand this. People are going to get on you if you do wrong. But people are also going to get on you if you do what? If you do right. There are people who are going to get mad at you if you do wrong, but there are also people who are going to get mad at you if you do right. Jesus says, since that's the case, you know what you ought to do? Do right. Pay the price for that one. Because he says, you're not going to ever make everybody happy. If you do the wrong thing, there's going to be people that aren't going to be happy with you. If you do the right thing, people aren't going to be happy with you. So since either way you're going to pay a price for it, just do the right thing and pay the price for doing what's right. He says in the long run, at the end of your life, you will be happy if you look back and say, you know what? I tried to do the right thing and I was willing to accept the price for that. If it made some people mad, if it made some people angry with me, disappointed me, whatever, I tried to do what was right. Now, I want you to think of these words. These are some of the words Jesus has just used saying happy, happy, happy. Poor, mourn, meek, hunger, merciful, persecuted. If I was to get 1,000 people, 10,000 people, and give them all pieces of paper and say, write down 6 words you associate with happiness, out of the 10,000 people, how many would have even one of those words on there? Not one. This is why I say all the time, everything about Christianity is countercultural. The culture, 10,000 people, what makes you happy? Here's things they put, well, money, If I had a big house, if I had a fancy car, if I had a good looking, if I had the most handsome husband or the most beautiful wife, or if I had, kids that would go to bed at 7 o'clock and sleep all night, and every time I speak, it'd be yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, and what can I do to serve you? They'd put stuff like that. Nobody would put, well, if I was poor in spirit, if I was mourning, if I was meek, if I was hungering to do the right thing. Nobody would put that. Only one person. Jesus did. Jesus did. And if you know the Sermon on the Mount, when he comes to the end of it, you know what he says? He says, now listen, it's great that you've heard all of this. It's great that you've heard all this teaching. But he said the real benefit is in the what? Now go do it. That's the challenge. And let me give you something I heard. Being a preacher's kid, I've heard this all my life. All my life, I've heard this phrase. You ever heard this? God doesn't want you to be happy. He wants you to be holy. You ever heard that phrase before? A lot of us have. I mean, I grew up going to all these different churches, hearing all these different preachers because my dad was a pastor. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard that statement. God's not interested in your happiness. God wants you to be holy, not happy. That sounds good. That sounds like a verse. Is that a verse somewhere? No, it's not a verse anywhere. And it's not true. Does God want us to be holy? Yes. But if we're a sincere follower of Christ, does that therefore mean we can't be happy? No. Jesus wants us to be holy, but he also makes it clear, I want you to be happy. You can be both. It is a false choice. It's not one or the other. You can be a genuine follower of Christ and enjoy the fire out of this life. You know what? In these last 25, 30 years that I've been a pastor or youth director, I've had some of the greatest times of my life. I don't look back at that and say, well, I went to work at a church and never had fun again. But a lot of people, that's what they think. Well, if I start going to church, I won't never get to have fun again. I won't never get to laugh again. If I thought that was true, I'd walk out too. I look back, the pastoring is a different thing. But I can't even begin to tell you. I look back at the 5 or 6 years I was a youth pastor, and that's been a long time ago now. Those were some of the greatest, most fun moments of my life. And you can go find, there's a whole bunch of them still around. You can go find some of the kids that were part of that youth group. Of course, they're all grown now. Ask them, we had a blast. And the thing that encourages me more than anything in the 25 years that I've been a pastor is I look back to those 5 or 6 years I was youth director, and I start thinking about all the names of the people that were in that group. And I wish they were all still in this church. A bunch of them are. But even the ones that aren't, you know what? Almost all of them are active serving in a church somewhere. And that means so much to me. And I think, you know what? We had a blast. We had a ball. We laughed. We caught up. We had fun. But at the same time, that bunch of kids that came through during those years, they're serving God somewhere. You can be holy and be happy. And that's what God wants us to do. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the time we've had. Thank you for the opportunity to be in your house. And Father, I do pray that you would help all of us to understand that you want us to be happy. You've given us the roadmap of how to do it. But you want it to be genuine happiness. Not the kind of happiness the world describes, where it's a happiness that's a short-lived happiness tied to what's. Where we get some new toy, some new possession, and we're happy for a few weeks or a couple of months until it gets old. You want us to have the kind of happiness that's lasting. And God, that kind of happiness is found not in what's, but in whose. And it starts with having a right relationship with you. You're the main who in our life we've got to be at peace with. But then it continues with all the people that are in our circle, all the people that we come in contact with on a regular basis, our friends, people that we're close to. It's about having good relationships with them, with others. And then, God, it's about being at peace with our own self. And saying, you know what? I'm going to quit trying to be somebody else. I was born an original. I'm not going to die a copy. Father, help us to grab these truths about happiness. Now, with every head